Hi everybody, this is Gary Fong, and purpose of this video is to go through my current gear bag and give you a little bit of advice on what gear to use for when and what I choose. And after knowing all of this equipment really intimately, now this is all Sony equipment. I have full systems of Canon and Nikon as well, but I don't really use them anymore ever since I started shooting the Sonys because of the OLED viewfinder and so many other new technologies that it has that aren't available right now with the optical DSLRs. So I'm going to start from the very beginning because this is the very interesting, and I've recommended this camera to so many of my friends. This right here is the Sony a6000, and this guy right here is the one that I actually shoot most often. I shoot this one more than any of these other cameras, and some of these other cameras are much more expensive. I think this one is around $700, and I actually shoot it with the kit lens. Not all the time. There's another lens that I'll show you that I use with this camera. This camera has a really, really quiet shutter. It's the fastest autofocus outside of this guy right here, the A77 Mark II. This one has a faster focus and a new technology that allows you to lock on the focus. So what I like about this one right here is it takes all of the E-series lenses. Now the E-series lenses, there's a whole bunch here, and I'm going to get around to explaining the difference between the three different types of lenses, which also can be very confusing. But this one can take all of the three series lenses. It can take an A mount, which is made for the larger Alpha 77s 99 series. Those are actually the better lenses. And then it can take the FE mount, which is the full frame, and then it can take the E mount, which is the APS size sensor. So this guy right here has a smaller APS size sensor with about a 1.5 magnification. The reason why it's so good, well, first of all, it's really tiny, which is awesome, but the focus is incredibly fast. So I really don't see any limitation to this one than, compared to the other professional cameras in terms of use. In fact, I find this one actually faster and more easy to use in many ways. So the way that the lenses can go on it, which is really nice, is that I can put on adapters. This one right here is the EA4 adapter. Now the EA4 adapter by Sony allows you to put on the A mount lenses, and that's actually more handy for when you're using, say, the A7 series, because those are actually full frame. But I'll show you on here. So you put this guy on, and then now I can put on the full frame, these beautiful full frame pieces of glass, the A mounts. And the A mounts are typically one stop faster than the E series or the FE series. They're bigger, and so you can see right here, it gets a little bit clunky, but it's awesome. I mean, you've got, like, this is a 16-35 f2.8 Zeiss. Beautiful piece of glass. And the balance is pretty nice because you can just put this in your hand. So, quite honestly, most of the shoots that I do are with the a6000, which is odd. But I'll go through the reasons why, and I'll kind of explain. So right here, I have the A7, the A7S, the A7R, and the A77 Mark II. Now these are my current gear bag, and then I'll go through all the different lenses. But let me go through this guy and finish this little section here on the A6000. The lens of choice for this A6000 is this one right here, this beautiful Zeiss FE 1.855. This guy right here is an incredibly sharp lens. It's an E mount. It's very, very light. With the APS factor, it becomes around an 80mm 1.8 lens, which is beautiful. And another thing about the Zeiss lenses is they have a circular aperture, which means the bokeh is actually circular. So if you're going to see, like Tivoli lights in the background, you won't see that stop sign looking type of background. You'll see actual circles. And what happens is when you're shooting, because it has circles like that, you get this beautiful watercolory kind of look for the bokeh. And this combination right here is probably the one that I shoot most often. This one right here is the combination that I use second most. This is the 24-70 f4 E mount. This is a full frame lens going on to a full frame A7S. Now the reason why I use A7S is because it's so incredible in low light situations that when I want to shoot, just like really intimate photos at home of the children or whatever, I can put this on and get a really nice low noise, kind of a really good, I use this a lot for movies. And because it's a 24-70 and it's full frame here, so it really is a true 24-70, I can zoom in and out. This one right here is just probably one of my favorite cameras ever. It has what's called a silent shutter, and that's really fun to use. Now the difference though is that this one doesn't shoot quite as fast. It's actually quite a bit slower than the 11 frame per second A6000. So there's two different uses that I do. I go with fast and a fast lens, so that would be this one right here, this very inexpensive A6000, and a fairly expensive Zeiss 1.8-55, but that is my combination. And then sometimes I'll use the Zeiss 55-1.8 on the A7S also to give you like an incredible low light sensitivity. A lot of people also say about, you know, the A7 series that the batteries die kind of quick, and that's true. They're not high capacity batteries, so you'll be really quite surprised if you're used to like the Alpha series, and then, you know, it's just like, wow, these things have gone already. So one reason that happens is because this is a Wi-Fi camera, and so what you do is you go to the Wi-Fi settings and the little radar thing, and then you turn airplane mode on. Once you do that, then that'll really cut a lot of the battery life. And then secondly, get the vertical grip. The vertical grip will allow you to hold two cameras in parallel, and they'll run and it'll show you how much you've got. And it's also great because you have one of your custom function buttons back here. You've got your way to trigger, your custom one button right here that I use for eye autofocus that you'll see in my other videos. So these two guys right here are the ones that I use most pretty much for everything. So let's go to the rest of the collection. So this is the Sony A7. This is the standard A7. I have the A7R and the A7 and the A7S. The A7 is, it's got phase detection autofocus, which is something that the A7R does not have. So it is a bit more responsive and faster focusing than you would find in the A7R. It's full frame, and it's 22 and some change megapixel rather than the 12 megapixel of the A7S. Now, I have not found at any point whatsoever that 12 megapixel was any limitation in my uses. I mean, I'm not blowing them up to canvas size or anything like that. And when I do, that's when I pull out the A7R. When I know I'm going to be somewhere and it's going to be a spectacular scenery, I put on the big gun, 36 megapixel, no anti-aliasing filter, the sharpest camera and the largest resolution digital camera on the market. The A7S happens to be the highest light sensitivity camera on the market. So I have two really radical ends of having the best, the highest ISO and the best image quality. The A7 is kind of in the middle. So it's not that great, not like the A7S on ISO, and it doesn't fire the big images like you would have on the A7R. So this one's kind of in the middle, and honestly, it's not that spectacular of a camera for a lot of uses. So what I wind up doing is I wind up using this as a video camera. It's great for that because of the phase detection autofocus. This one right here is, again, the Zeiss 55 1.8 lens, my favorite lens. It's so sharp, it's tiny, and it's fantastic for portraiture. Now, let's move on. Now that we have the A7R here, I want to show you some of the lenses that we can put on this that are part of the FE series. So this one right here is an E series lens. This lens right here, this is a really good combination here for travel or tourism or whatever. This is a really light lens. Man, if you're going to be doing architectural photography or anything like that, if you're into real estate photography, this would be a really good combination because the A7 is not nearly as expensive as the A7R, as the A7S, which is the most expensive camera of the series. And then you put this guy on. This one right here is a 10-18, and which comes out to be, again, like probably a 16-24 or a 15-24. It's extremely wide, and so it's a very pretty lens, but it's extremely lightweight. And so if you're going to be doing traveling, this is a great one. If you don't want to go too much to telephoto or anything like that. This guy right here, the A7R, which is the heavyweight champion of the world. It's tiny, right? But it has the largest full-frame sensor, 36 megapixel, no anti-aliasing filter. And an anti-aliasing filter is something that goes in front of the sensor that breaks up what's called a moire pattern. The moire pattern is something that you'd see kind of like if you took two screen doors and kind of tilted them in different angles, you'd see kind of, you know, this wild kind of pattern. That goes away with an anti-aliasing filter, but with these new cameras that have no anti-aliasing filter, there's not that extra piece of glass to go in between your lens and the sensor. So it makes for a much, much sharper image. And you'll hear everywhere that the A7R is the best image quality in digital photography, period, right now. The A-mount lenses are the best that you can get. The reason why they are is because there's no compromise. They're not trying to make them smaller. They're not one stop slower than the E-series mounts. The E-series mounts, like typically if you had f2.8 1635, it would come out as an f4 in the E-series mount because the barrels are much smaller. And I'll show you again with the 70 to 200s. But what I do when I get into this big behemoth guy here, right here, is, you know, it's small enough that I'm not that concerned about size. And this is so much smaller than an actual DSLR. It's getting kind of honking big here with this massive piece of glass. But if you're going to do landscape photography or murals or canvases, man, put this guy on RAW. Shoot this thing right here, 16 to 35, and you'll get the full 16 to 35 at f2.8. So, you know these EA4 adapters? There's a nice little tripod hole on the bottom, and they fit in your hand just really nicely. So when you're shooting with these, it's almost like you want to get into the A-mounts for the, you know, the fastest quality lenses. Just think of the camera as built in with an E8 series mount, and then whenever you want to change lenses, just leave this guy on, and you'll have access to all the great lenses. Now, a lot of people are really impatient for the E-series lenses, and they want, you know, Sony to make many, many more, and that's awesome. And they are really fun, compact little lenses, but that's not, you know, my importance is to have high speeds so that I can go into lower light situations and also have more fallout in the background. Have a prettier bokeh. So that's when we get into the A7R, I like to leave the EA4 adapter on, and then I get into all of these beautiful lenses right here. This guy right here is beautiful. This is the 24 to 70. So this right here is the 24 to 70. This is the 16 to 35. And these really remind me of the old days when I shot Hasselblads. They're the T-Star. They're really, really heavy lenses. Now, and they're extremely expensive. So this guy right here is the 24 to 70. And the 24 to 70 is a great general multi-purpose, all-purpose lens. A lot of wedding photographers will use this as a staple and use this for pretty much anything, because if you want to go wide or narrow or whatever, come in tight, you can do that with this lens. So the lenses of choice, really, I'm just going to put these guys aside because this is a macro lens, a 52.8 macro lens, and I do use it quite a bit when I'm shooting screens or products or things like that. This one right here is a kit lens. It actually comes with one of the Alpha, I think it's the 77 or 99, I think, I'm not sure. But it's a cool lens. It's an 11 to 18 APS size lens, 4.5 to 5.6, which is but it really becomes like a 16 to 24, and it's really lightweight. So this is a handy one actually for doing videos. One thing I found about videos is you can, you know, say, ooh, I want to open it to f1.4 and things like that. And the autofocus capabilities of these cameras are incredible, but safer to have it kind of, you know, hovering around the mid-range like f4, 5, 6. Even though I say that right now, I'm shooting this video at f1.4 because I like how it looks. Incidentally, what you're seeing right now is this is being filmed on a Sony A99, which is a camera that I don't have on here because I don't really use the A99 for stills. A99 is not a fast focusing camera, and it's about 22 megapixels, so you already get something like that with the A7, which is much smaller. There are benefits to the A99, like it has an articulating screen that goes completely up and around, so you can see yourself while you're shooting into the lens, but the benefit to that all goes to video. So typically I use the A99 for video. Okay, let's talk about these cool pieces of glass. Now there's two different 70 to 200s, and it's kind of funny to me that when people see these, they go, oh, I didn't know you could put Canon lenses on your Sony. Well, you can through Metabones adapters, but they often think that these are Canon lenses, and these aren't. These are the Sony G lenses, and there's two of them here. They look like they're the same in size, but they're not really. They're this one's, you know, a bit smaller. It's maybe about an inch shorter or something like that. Not a ton smaller, but it is smaller. And this is the E series lens. Now you can see right here, this is 70 to 200 at f4. This one right here is 70 to 200 at f2.8. And so the benefit of this one would be, of course, the size. A little bit smaller, fits directly on the FE series lenses, so this would be something you'd put on the A7s. But if you're going to go this big anyway, I mean, my idea is just use the EA4 adapter and then stick this on, then you have a full 2.8. You know, no compromise, big freaking chunk of lens, 2.8. Now this one right here is called a G series. So you'll notice that Sony has the regular series lenses. They're just called Sony. And then they have the Zeiss, which is the really expensive, you know, German glass. And then they have the G series, which is would be equivalent to the L series lenses on Canon. These are professional grade lenses, very, very sharp, very fast to focus, and very quiet. This right here, since we're talking about these A-mount lenses, is the A77 Mark II. This is the fastest focusing camera on the planet. It'll go an actual 12 frames per second at the 12 frame per second mode, shooting with exposure and focus calculation. No other camera can do that. It does stick everything at f3.5 because the part that is the slowest of high-speed motor would be the aperture having to physically change with every single shot. So what they do is they lock it on f3.5, in other words, aperture mode set at f3.5, and then let the camera do its adjustment through auto ISO, shutter speed changes, or whatever. This right here is highly acclaimed. The 85 f1.4 lens. This is a bread and butter portrait lens for most photographers, and incredibly sharp. The magnification on this APS sensor is 1.5, so your 85 becomes around a 120. So you've got a 120 f1.4. When you're doing videos, this one's beautiful. You can't use it all the time, especially if people, you know, are in motion. But if you want to make it look just like you're shooting a movie, put this combination on and then have it do just track focus on your subject, and you'll see it looks exactly like you're filmmaking, which is really awesome. It's not a quiet lens, and when it focuses, the barrel makes sounds and it comes and goes and it actually stretches out. So on a lens like this actually makes me miss my Canon 85 f1.2, which is much quieter, but this one actually is a faster focusing lens. And and then of course, you know, you're now into the Sony family, which is great. The A77 Mark II is something that I use for really high-speed action only. And the reason that this one is better than, say, the A6000, which kind of uses the same technology, but this one's got something else that's different. This one has what's called the flexible spot, which locks. So that means, for example, if I want to shoot people, I'll put it on face detection. I'll let it just track the person around. But once I find somebody, I just put my finger down and it'll stay on them until I fire. And while I'm firing, it'll stay on them that whole entire time, focus and exposure. And that's something that you can't really do with the A6000. The A6000 will find people and then it'll kind of move around. You have to then choose or anoint the subject that you want through focus lock. And again, all these topics are in my zillion videos on YouTube. But The A77 is a speed demon, and I pull it out only when I'm really going to be doing a lot of action. It's not super high speed ISO, so that goes to A7S, and but it does natively mount these gorgeous A-mount lenses. So if I'm going to use the 70-200 on the A77, I'm shooting sports, this thing now behaves like a 300 millimeter f2.8 shooting at 12 frames per second, well, at f3.5, with tracking autofocus, continuous tracking autofocus, and results that you wouldn't believe. You can look at my other video on YouTube that shows me shooting a soccer match, and you can see how this thing tracks. There's other cameras that do tracking, like the Nikon D4 has its own way of kind of like pattern recognition of a subject. It's not as accurate as this, because on these you can actually see the square going around the thing that you want to choose. This is an advantage you don't have with optical. With optical, you can't put a Terminator-style target locator in front of your eyeball. And also with optical, you can't like turn it into black and white, for example. There's a lot of advantages with using electronic viewfinder. So these right here would be really, you know, the king of the lenses. And these are the A-mount Zeiss's and G-series lenses. So let me just kind of go through a real quick wrap-up, because I actually do have, I think at this point, the entire Sony system, and I've bought all of them. They didn't give it to me. I bought, you know, first I got the, I think the A77, the first one, and then I became kind of a Sony nut. But anyway, so knowing the entire system, I use the A6000 with the Zeiss or the kit lens, but the Zeiss 16 to 70 f4 Zeiss, or the kit lens, that little 16 to 35 f3.555. I use that for probably a majority of my stuff. The next one in line would be the A7S, and this is just because I have kids and they're 3 years old and they're twins, and I shoot them a lot in very, very low light conditions. I use the A7S, shooting that at with the 55 millimeter f1.4, or those same lenses that I mentioned. Then the third in line would be the A7R. The A7R is when I'm shooting something that has to be spectacular. With the A7R, it's always with the A4 adapter, so that I get access to these big A-mount lenses. And then after that comes the A77 Mark II. That's for when I'm shooting action. Like for example, if there's a sports event or something like that, this one comes out, and this one will kick ass over any other camera, especially, you know, when you're shooting sports. And then, yes, I have the A7, which is great for filmmaking, and the A99, which is also great for filmmaking. And that's pretty much it. The A6000, the only thing about it that makes it not usable for filmmaking is it will not take sound from an external source. And that's basically it. Okay, so that's the entire Sony gear bag that I use, and the reasons that I use them. And of course, subscribe to this channel and look at GaryFong.com. I actually have complete how-to videos on, at this point, every single Sony in the line, the A7, A7S, A7R, multiple hour videos, setting by setting, button by button, my choices, and why I do the settings that I do. Okay, thanks for watching.